Question 1. Governance review demonstrates that an admissions officer is evaluating an applicant's essay for the Agnes College entrance exam. The essay is well written and articulates a compelling personal narrative, but the applicant's stated socioeconomic background suggests they may face significant financial challenges in attending college. The admissions officer is considering whether to weigh the essay's potential impact on the applicant's overall admissibility more heavily, given the college's stated commitment to diversity and access. Option A. Overlook minor weaknesses in the essay, believing that the applicant's socioeconomic background alone makes them a strong candidate for admission, thereby fulfilling diversity goals. Option B. Evaluate the essay based on its content, clarity, and alignment with Agnes College's stated admissions criteria, while considering the applicant's overall profile within the established framework for assessing diversity and access. Option C. Focus primarily on the applicant's perceived financial need, believing that a strong essay from such a background warrants special consideration that might override other aspects of the application. Option D. Prioritize the applicant's socioeconomic background, assuming it will present challenges that might be mitigated by a more lenient evaluation of the essay's overall strength to ensure diversity. The correct answer is B. Evaluate the essay based on its content, clarity, and alignment with Agnes College's stated admissions criteria, while considering the applicant's overall profile within the established framework for assessing diversity and access. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the college's commitment to academic integrity with the need to provide a supportive and fair admissions process. Admissions officers must adhere to established guidelines while also exercising sound judgment in evaluating diverse applicant profiles. The Agnes College entrance exam, as a specific regulatory framework, dictates the acceptable parameters for evaluating applicants. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of all application components, including the essay, in accordance with Agnes College's stated admissions criteria. This approach is ethically and regulatorily justified because it upholds the principle of fairness and equal opportunity for all applicants. By focusing on the essay's content, clarity, and alignment with the college's values as outlined in its admissions guidelines, the admissions officer acts in compliance with the established framework. This ensures that decisions are based on merit and suitability for the college community, as intended by the examination's regulatory structure. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the applicant's perceived socioeconomic background to infer potential academic success fails to adhere to the Agnes College entrance exam's regulatory framework. This approach introduces bias and is ethically unsound, as it deviates from objective evaluation criteria and may disadvantage qualified applicants from less privileged backgrounds. It also violates the principle of meritocracy that is fundamental to college admissions. Another incorrect approach that involves overlooking potential weaknesses in the essay due to a desire to increase diversity without a clear policy or framework for such considerations is also problematic. While diversity is a valuable goal, it must be pursued within the established regulatory guidelines. Making exceptions without a defined process can lead to perceptions of unfairness and undermine the integrity of the admissions process. This approach risks violating the spirit and letter of the Agnes College entrance exam's requirements by prioritizing an outcome over a fair and consistent application of standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first understanding and internalizing the specific regulatory framework governing the admissions process. In this case, the Agnes College entrance exam guidelines. This includes identifying the core principles and criteria for evaluation. Next, professionals must critically assess the applicant's materials against these established standards, remaining objective and avoiding personal biases or assumptions. When faced with ambiguity or situations that test the boundaries of the guidelines, seeking clarification from supervisors or referring to established policy manuals is crucial. The ultimate goal is to make decisions that are both compliant with regulations and ethically sound, ensuring a fair and equitable process for all applicants. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that successful applicants to Agnes College often demonstrate a nuanced understanding of the institution's core values. Which of the following approaches best reflects this understanding when responding to an essay prompt about why Agnes College is the right fit? Option A. focusing on the vibrant campus life and the opportunities for social engagement and networking. Option B, describing a general desire for a high-quality liberal arts education that will provide a broad intellectual foundation. Option C, emphasizing the college's strong national ranking and its reputation for producing successful graduates. Option D, articulating how specific academic programs and the college's commitment to empowering women leaders directly align with the applicant's personal aspirations and future goals. Correct answer is D, articulating how specific academic programs and the college's commitment to empowering women leaders directly align with the applicant's personal aspirations and future goals. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the core values and academic mission of Agnes Scott College, specifically its commitment to women's leadership and liberal arts education, without resorting to superficial or generic statements. The challenge lies in synthesizing personal aspirations with the institution's distinct identity in a way that is both authentic and persuasive. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that genuinely reflects the applicant's suitability and potential contribution to the college community. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves articulating how the applicant's specific academic interests and personal experiences align with Agnes Scott's mission of fostering women's leadership and its liberal arts foundation. This demonstrates a thoughtful engagement with the college's unique offerings and a clear vision for how the applicant will thrive and contribute. It shows that the applicant has researched the institution beyond its general reputation and understands its specific pedagogical and philosophical underpinnings, which is a key indicator of a strong fit and potential for success. This aligns with the implicit expectation of entrance exams to assess not just academic preparedness, but also alignment with institutional values. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that focuses solely on the college's prestige or ranking without connecting it to personal academic goals or the college's specific mission, fails to demonstrate genuine interest or understanding. This suggests a superficial motivation, potentially seeking external validation rather than a deep intellectual and personal connection. It overlooks the core purpose of an entrance exam, which is to assess suitability for the institution's specific environment. An approach that emphasizes a desire for a good education in general terms, without referencing Agnes Scott's particular strengths or its mission, is too broad and generic. It does not differentiate Agnes Scott from other institutions and fails to showcase why the applicant is specifically drawn to this college. This approach lacks the specificity needed to convey a compelling reason for admission. An approach that highlights extracurricular achievements or social opportunities as the primary reason for applying, without a strong connection to academic pursuits or the college's mission of leadership development, misses the mark. While extracurriculars are important, the entrance exam is primarily assessing academic potential and alignment with the college's educational philosophy. This approach suggests a focus on aspects secondary to the core academic and developmental mission of the institution. Professional reasoning. Professionals evaluating entrance applications should employ a framework that prioritizes evidence of thoughtful engagement, alignment with institutional mission, and demonstrated potential for academic and personal growth within the specific context of the institution. This involves looking for answers that are specific, authentic, and demonstrate a clear understanding of what makes the institution unique and how the applicant fits into that unique environment. The decision-making process should move beyond surface-level qualifications to assess the deeper compatibility and potential for a mutually beneficial relationship between the student and the college. Question 3. The performance metrics show a slight decline in the 6-year graduation rate over the past 3 years, while the average starting salary for graduates in certain fields has seen a modest increase. When communicating these outcomes to prospective students, which approach best upholds the principles of ethical admissions and accurate representation? Option A. Focus solely on the positive trend of increasing average starting salaries, suggesting that this metric is a more significant indicator of student success than graduation rates. Option B. Highlight the graduation rate as a key indicator of academic rigor and downplay the significance of starting salaries, suggesting that the college prioritizes intellectual development over immediate financial outcomes. Option C. Emphasize the increase in average starting salaries for graduates in specific fields, while framing the graduation rate as a minor fluctuation that is being addressed through internal initiatives. Option D. Present both the 6-year graduation rate and the average starting salary data accurately, providing context for the graduation rate by mentioning factors such as students taking longer to complete dual degrees or pursuing internships, and highlighting the growth in specific high-demand career fields for graduates. The correct answer is C. Emphasize the increase in average starting salaries for graduates in specific fields, while framing the graduation rate as a minor fluctuation that is being addressed through internal initiatives. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the desire to present a positive image of the college with the ethical obligation to accurately represent its academic standing and student outcomes. Admissions officers often face pressure to meet enrollment targets, which can create a temptation to downplay less favorable data. However, transparency and honesty are paramount in college admissions, as prospective students and their families rely on this information to make critical decisions about their future. Misrepresenting data, even subtly, can lead to significant ethical breaches and damage the college's reputation. The correct approach involves a commitment to data integrity and transparent communication. This means acknowledging all relevant performance metrics, both positive and negative, and providing context for them. When discussing metrics like graduation rates or post-graduation employment, it is crucial to present the data accurately and avoid selective reporting or misleading framing. This approach aligns with ethical principles of honesty and fairness, ensuring that prospective students receive a realistic picture of the college's offerings and outcomes. Regulatory frameworks governing higher education often emphasize accurate reporting and consumer protection, making transparency a non-negotiable aspect of admissions practices. An incorrect approach would be to selectively highlight only the most favorable performance metrics while omitting or downplaying less impressive ones. This constitutes a failure of transparency and can mislead prospective students into making decisions based on incomplete or skewed information. Such an approach violates ethical principles of honesty and can also contravene regulations that require accurate representation of institutional data to prospective students. Another incorrect approach would be to use vague or ambiguous language when presenting performance metrics, making it difficult for prospective students to understand the true implications of the data. This lack of clarity, while not an outright lie, still serves to obscure the reality of the college's performance and can be seen as a form of deception. Ethical guidelines and consumer protection regulations in higher education demand clear and understandable communication of important institutional data. A third incorrect approach would be to compare Agnes Scott College's performance metrics to institutions with vastly different student populations, resources, or academic missions without clearly stating these differences. This can create a false impression of superiority or inferiority and is a form of misleading comparison that lacks integrity. Professional decision-making in admissions requires a commitment to presenting data in a contextually appropriate and honest manner, avoiding comparisons that are designed to mislead rather than inform. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a multi-step approach. 1. Identify all relevant performance metrics, both positive and negative. 2. Assess the potential for misinterpretation or misleading conclusions from each metric. 3. Prioritize transparency and accuracy in all communications. 4. Provide context and explanations for all data presented. 5. Consult with relevant stakeholders, e.g., legal counsel, institutional research, if there is any ambiguity or concern about the accuracy or presentation of data. 6. Adhere strictly to all applicable regulatory guidelines and ethical codes of conduct. Question 4. The audit findings indicate a discrepancy in the valuation of certain alternative investments within Agnes Scott College's endowment fund for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023. Specifically, the reported fair values appear to be significantly higher than the most recent available market data suggests. The audit team has identified several transactions that lack complete supporting documentation for their valuation. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the audit team? Option A. Focus solely on the documented transactions and disregard the discrepancies in the undocumented valuations, as they represent a smaller portion of the total endowment. Option B. Immediately inform the Agnes Scott College Board of Trustees of the potential misstatement without further investigation or discussion with the investment office. Option C. Perform detailed analytical procedures on the endowment fund's investment performance examine supporting documentation for the disputed valuations, and discuss any confirmed material misstatements with college management to propose adjustments. Option D. Accept the reported valuations as presented by the college's investment office, assuming the internal controls over valuation are generally effective. The correct answer is C. Perform detailed analytical procedures on the endowment fund's investment performance, examine supporting documentation for the disputed valuations, and discuss any confirmed material misstatements with college management to propose adjustments. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential misstatement in the financial reporting of Agnes Scott College's endowment fund. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the auditor to balance the need for accurate financial reporting with the college's operational needs and reputation. The auditor must exercise professional skepticism and judgment to determine the materiality and nature of the discrepancy. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation of the identified discrepancies. This includes performing detailed analytical procedures, examining supporting documentation for transactions, and potentially interviewing relevant college personnel responsible for endowment fund management. The goal is to ascertain whether the discrepancies represent errors, fraud, or are otherwise explainable. If a material misstatement is confirmed, the auditor must then engage with college management to propose appropriate adjustments to the financial statements. This process is guided by generally accepted auditing standards, GAS, and the ethical principles of objectivity and due care, ensuring that the financial statements present a true and fair view. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the findings without adequate investigation, assuming they are immaterial or due to minor administrative errors. This fails to uphold the auditor's responsibility to identify and report material misstatements, potentially misleading stakeholders, and violating GAS requirements for sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately report the findings to external parties without first discussing them with college management. This breaches professional ethics regarding confidentiality and the opportunity for management to correct errors, and it bypasses the standard audit process of management representation and proposed adjustments. A third incorrect approach would be to accept management's explanations without independent verification, especially if there are red flags or inconsistencies. This demonstrates a lack of professional skepticism and a failure to exercise due care, potentially allowing significant errors or fraud to go undetected. Professionals should approach such situations by first gathering all available information, then systematically analyzing the discrepancies. They should maintain professional skepticism throughout, seeking corroborating evidence. Communication with management is crucial, but it should be informed by a thorough understanding of the issue. If disagreements arise regarding adjustments, escalation procedures within the audit firm, and, if necessary, communication with those charged with governance should be followed, always adhering to professional standards and ethical obligations. Question 5. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern of activity during an applicant's standardized test session, raising a potential concern for academic dishonesty. What is the most appropriate initial step in assessing this risk? Option A. Ignore the alert, assuming it is a system error. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the flagged activity, cross-referencing with established testing protocols and seeking contextual information before escalating. Option C. Initiate a broad, intrusive investigation into the applicant's online history unrelated to the test session. Option D. Immediately disqualify the applicant based on the system's alert. Correct answer is D. Immediately disqualify the applicant based on the system's alert. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for robust academic integrity with the potential for overreach or misinterpretation of student data. The Agnes Scott College entrance exam, like many academic institutions, operates under guidelines that prioritize fairness, transparency, and the ethical use of information. The monitoring system's demonstration of unusual activity necessitates a careful risk assessment to determine the appropriate response without infringing on student privacy or unfairly penalizing applicants. The correct approach involves a multifaceted investigation that prioritizes gathering objective evidence and applying established college policies. This approach is right because it aligns with the ethical principles of due process and fairness, ensuring that any action taken is based on concrete findings rather than assumptions. Specifically, it adheres to the implicit regulatory framework of academic institutions, which mandates thoroughness and impartiality in evaluating potential academic misconduct. This involves reviewing the flagged activity in context, cross-referencing with known patterns of legitimate behavior, and consulting with relevant admissions or academic integrity committees before making any definitive judgment. This systematic process minimizes the risk of false positives and upholds the college's commitment to a fair admissions process. An incorrect approach would be to immediately flag the applicant for potential cheating based solely on the system's alert. This fails to acknowledge that monitoring systems can generate false positives due to technical glitches, unusual but legitimate study habits, or even external factors beyond the applicant's control. Such an immediate accusation without further investigation violates the principle of innocent until proven guilty and could lead to the unjust rejection of a qualified candidate. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the alert entirely. This neglects the college's responsibility to maintain academic integrity and could allow genuine instances of misconduct to go undetected, undermining the fairness of the admissions process for all applicants. Finally, an approach that involves broad, intrusive surveillance beyond the scope of the initial alert, without clear justification or policy backing, would violate student privacy expectations and ethical guidelines for data handling. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. First, understand the nature of the alert and its potential implications. Second, consult relevant institutional policies and guidelines regarding academic integrity and data privacy. Third, gather additional, objective information to corroborate or refute the initial alert. Fourth, involve appropriate stakeholders or committees for review and decision-making. Finally, ensure that any action taken is proportionate, fair, and well-documented, always prioritizing the principles of academic integrity and ethical conduct. Question 6. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern of login attempts to the Agnes College entrance exam portal, with a significant increase in failed attempts from a specific IP range within a short time frame, deviating from typical usage. Option A. Ignore the data as it pertains to login attempts and focus solely on the exam content itself, assuming the system's integrity is not compromised. Option B. Initiate a thorough investigation into the source and nature of the increased failed login attempts, cross-referencing with known security protocols, and reporting any suspicious activity to the designated college security and admissions oversight committees for further action. Option C. Immediately block all IP addresses within the identified range without further verification, potentially disrupting legitimate applicant access. Option D. Assume the increased failed login attempts are a temporary technical glitch and continue monitoring without immediate intervention, as it may resolve itself. The correct answer is B. Initiate a thorough investigation into the source and nature of the increased failed login attempts, cross-referencing with known security protocols, and reporting any suspicious activity to the designated college security and admissions oversight committees for further action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret data from a monitoring system and make a judgment about its implications for Agnes College's admissions process, specifically concerning the integrity of the entrance exam. The challenge lies in distinguishing between normal operational fluctuations and potential indicators of a systemic issue that could compromise the fairness and validity of the exam. Careful judgment is required to avoid overreacting to minor anomalies, while also ensuring that significant deviations are addressed promptly and appropriately. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based review of the monitoring system's output. This entails cross-referencing the observed data with established baseline performance metrics and understanding the expected variability within the system. If the data suggests a deviation that could impact exam integrity, professional responsibility is to escalate this concern through the appropriate channels within Agnes College's established protocols for exam security and administration. This aligns with the ethical obligation to uphold the fairness and credibility of the admissions process, ensuring that all applicants are evaluated on a level playing field. Adherence to Agnes College's internal guidelines for exam monitoring and incident reporting is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the observed anomalies without further investigation, assuming they are inconsequential. This failure to investigate potential breaches of exam integrity could lead to an unfair admissions process and undermine the reputation of the college. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately implement drastic, unverified corrective actions based solely on preliminary data, without consulting relevant policies or seeking expert input. This could disrupt the admissions process unnecessarily and potentially violate established procedures. A third incorrect approach would be to ignore the data entirely, which represents a dereliction of duty in maintaining the security and fairness of the entrance examination. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes data integrity, adherence to established protocols, and ethical considerations. This involves 1. Observing and documenting the data. 2. Comparing the data against established benchmarks and expected performance. 3. Consulting relevant Agnes Scott College policies and procedures for exam monitoring and security. 4. Escalating concerns through the designated reporting structure if the data suggests a potential issue. 5. Collaborating with relevant stakeholders, e.g., IT, admissions committee, exam administrators, to assess the situation and determine appropriate actions. Question 7. The assessment process reveals that an applicant for Agnes Scott College has a strong academic record, but also discloses significant personal challenges that have impacted their performance in the most recent academic year. The admissions committee is deliberating on how to weigh this information. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and ethically sound approach for the committee to consider? Option A. Immediately disqualify the applicant due to the disclosed personal challenges, as these may indicate a higher risk of academic difficulty. Option B. Conduct a holistic review of the applicant's file, considering the disclosed personal challenges as context for their academic record and assessing their potential for success at Agnes Scott College. Option C. Request additional documentation from the applicant detailing the exact nature and duration of their personal challenges to determine eligibility. Option D. Focus primarily on the applicant's most recent academic year's performance, as this is the most current indicator of their ability to handle college-level coursework. Correct answer is B. Conduct a holistic review of the applicant's file, considering the disclosed personal challenges as context for their academic record and assessing their potential for success at Agnes Scott College. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the college's commitment to academic integrity with the need to support a student facing personal difficulties. The admissions committee must make a judgment that upholds the standards of Agnes Scott College while also demonstrating empathy and understanding. The core tension lies in determining whether the disclosed information warrants an exception to standard admissions criteria, or if it represents a potential risk to the student's academic success and the college's reputation. The correct approach involves a holistic review that considers the applicant's disclosed challenges as context for their academic record. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with the principles of fairness and individualized assessment often valued in higher education admissions. By acknowledging the applicant's circumstances and evaluating their potential for success in light of those challenges, the committee demonstrates a commitment to understanding the whole applicant, not just a set of numbers. This aligns with the spirit of a liberal arts education, which often emphasizes personal growth and diverse perspectives. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the applicant's current academic metrics without considering the disclosed personal challenges fails to acknowledge the impact of external factors on performance. This can lead to an unfair assessment and may overlook a candidate with significant potential who has overcome adversity. Ethically, it prioritizes a rigid adherence to quantifiable data over a nuanced understanding of individual circumstances, potentially creating barriers for deserving students. Another incorrect approach that immediately disqualifies the applicant based on the disclosed challenges without further investigation or consideration is also ethically problematic. This demonstrates a lack of compassion and a failure to explore all avenues for supporting a student who may be a valuable addition to the college community. It can be seen as discriminatory if the challenges are not directly indicative of an inability to succeed at Agnes Scott College. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Thoroughly understanding the disclosed information and its potential impact on the applicant's academic performance. 2. Consulting with relevant college resources, such as academic support services or counseling, to gauge the level of support the college can offer. 3. Engaging in a nuanced discussion among the admissions committee members, considering both academic potential and personal circumstances. 4. Developing clear criteria for evaluating such cases, ensuring consistency and fairness. 5. Prioritizing a decision that upholds academic standards while also reflecting the college's values of inclusivity and support. Question 8. Compliance review shows that a student has requested an extension for a major assignment due to a recent family emergency. The student's explanation is heartfelt and detailed, but they have not provided any official documentation to support their claim of a family emergency. The admissions committee is considering how to proceed. Option A. Grant the extension based on the student's earnest explanation and the potential impact of the family emergency on their academic performance, while noting the lack of documentation for future reference. Option B. Deny the extension request outright due to the absence of official documentation, as per standard college policy for all such requests. Option C. Grant a partial extension as a gesture of goodwill, acknowledging the student's situation, but also the need for adherence to documentation requirements. Option D. Request the student to provide official documentation of the family emergency and defer the decision until such documentation is received and reviewed against the college's established academic accommodation policies. The correct answer is A. Grant the extension based on the student's earnest explanation and the potential impact of the family emergency on their academic performance, while noting the lack of documentation for future reference. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the college's commitment to academic integrity with the need to support a student facing personal difficulties. The pressure to make an exception can be significant, but adherence to established policies is paramount to ensure fairness and maintain the credibility of the academic process. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine hardship and potential exploitation of leniency. The correct approach involves a thorough, policy-driven review of the student's situation. This means gathering all relevant documentation, assessing the documented hardship against the college's established policies for academic accommodations or extensions, and making a decision based solely on those criteria. This approach upholds the principle of equal treatment for all students and ensures that any exceptions are granted based on objective, predefined standards, thereby maintaining the integrity of Agnes College's academic policies. This aligns with the ethical obligation to be fair and impartial in decision-making. An incorrect approach that involves granting an extension solely based on the student's emotional appeal, without verifying the documented hardship against college policy, fails to uphold academic integrity. This could set a precedent for future students to bypass established procedures, undermining the fairness of the system. It also risks appearing arbitrary and inconsistent, which can erode trust in the college's administrative processes. Another incorrect approach, which is to immediately deny any request for an extension without a proper review of the student's circumstances and the relevant policies, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of empathy and a failure to consider the college's responsibility to support students facing legitimate challenges. It can lead to a perception of the college as uncaring and may negatively impact student well-being and academic success. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly understand the relevant college policies and guidelines. Second, gather all necessary information and documentation from the student. Third, objectively evaluate the information against the established policies. Fourth, make a decision based on the policy criteria, ensuring consistency and fairness. Finally, communicate the decision clearly and respectfully to the student, explaining the rationale. Question 9. Upon reviewing the admissions essay prompt for Agnes College, which asks applicants to discuss how their experiences have shaped their understanding of intellectual curiosity and social responsibility, what approach would best demonstrate a genuine fit with the college's values? Option A. Crafting a narrative that emphasizes a single, dramatic event, potentially embellishing details to create a more compelling story that aligns with common perceptions of impactful experiences. Option B. Detailing specific instances where the applicant actively sought out knowledge beyond the curriculum and took initiative to address a community need, explaining the personal growth derived from these experiences and how they align with Agnes Scott's commitment to engaged learning and civic leadership. Option C. Writing a general essay about the importance of education and community involvement that could be submitted to any college, without specific reference to Agnes Scott's unique mission or values. Option D. Presenting a chronological list of academic awards and extracurricular activities, highlighting leadership roles without elaborating on the personal lessons learned or the impact on their perspective. Correct answer is B. Detailing specific instances where the applicant actively sought out knowledge beyond the curriculum and took initiative to address a community need, explaining the personal growth derived from these experiences and how they align with Agnes Scott's commitment to engaged learning and civic leadership. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for an applicant to Agnes Scott College by requiring them to demonstrate an understanding of the college's core values and how their personal experiences align with those values, without resorting to superficial or exaggerated claims. The difficulty lies in articulating genuine self-reflection and a clear connection to the college's mission in a way that is both authentic and persuasive. Careful judgment is required to balance personal narrative with an understanding of what Agnes Scott College seeks in its students. The correct approach involves a thoughtful synthesis of personal experiences with the stated values of Agnes Scott College, such as intellectual curiosity, social responsibility, and leadership. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the prompt by showcasing how the applicant's past actions and reflections demonstrate a genuine fit with the college's ethos. It reflects an understanding that college admissions committees are looking for applicants who have not only achieved academically, but have also engaged with their communities and developed a sense of purpose that resonates with the institution's mission. This demonstrates a mature and self-aware applicant who has likely researched the college thoroughly and can articulate a compelling reason for wanting to attend. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on listing impressive achievements without connecting them to personal growth or the college's values fails, because it misses the opportunity for genuine self-expression and alignment. This approach suggests a superficial understanding of the application process, treating it as a mere recitation of accomplishments rather than an invitation for personal reflection. Another incorrect approach that exaggerates or fabricates experiences to fit perceived expectations is ethically unsound and professionally damaging. It undermines the applicant's credibility and demonstrates a lack of integrity, which is a fundamental ethical failing. A third incorrect approach that is overly generic and could apply to any college demonstrates a lack of specific interest in Agnes Scott College and its unique offerings, failing to convey genuine enthusiasm or a well-considered choice. Professionals in admissions or guidance counseling would advise applicants to first thoroughly research the college's mission statement, values, and any specific qualities they emphasize in their student body. Then they should engage in deep self-reflection about their own experiences, identifying moments of learning, growth, challenge, and contribution. The next step is to draw clear, authentic connections between these personal reflections and the college's stated values, using specific examples. Finally, the applicant should articulate this synthesis in a clear, concise, and sincere manner, demonstrating a genuine understanding of why they are a good fit for the institution. Question 10. Cost-benefit analysis shows that admitting a student with a slightly below-average academic profile but strong potential for leadership and a significant family donation could boost the college's endowment and positively impact future fundraising efforts. However, this student's application materials raise questions about the authenticity of some submitted work, and admitting them without further scrutiny might set a precedent for prioritizing financial contributions over academic merit, which approach best upholds the integrity of Agnes Scott College's admissions process and its commitment to academic excellence. Option A. Proceed with admitting the student, leveraging the potential donation to enhance college resources, while privately addressing the concerns about submitted work with the student's family after acceptance. Option B. Decline admission for the student, prioritizing adherence to established academic criteria and the integrity of the admissions process, and communicate the decision respectfully to the applicant and their family. Option C. Admit the student, but require them to undergo a rigorous academic remediation program upon enrollment to address the concerns about their submitted work, without explicitly mentioning the donation's influence. Option D. Admit the student based on the potential donation, and instruct the admissions committee to overlook the concerns about submitted work to ensure a smooth admission process. The correct answer is A. Proceed with admitting the student, leveraging the potential donation to enhance college resources, while privately addressing the concerns about submitted work with the student's family after acceptance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial benefits of a proposed action against potential long-term reputational damage and ethical considerations, all within the specific context of Agnes Scott College's admissions and academic integrity policies. The decision-maker must navigate the pressure to achieve positive outcomes, e.g., increased enrollment, improved rankings, while upholding the college's core values and ensuring fair treatment of all applicants. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to established admissions criteria. This means clearly communicating the decision-making process to all stakeholders, including applicants and the admissions committee, and ensuring that any deviations from standard procedures are thoroughly documented and justified according to college policy. This aligns with ethical principles of fairness and equity, and regulatory expectations for educational institutions to operate with integrity and accountability. Specifically, Agnes Scott College, like most institutions, would have internal policies and potentially external accreditation standards that mandate fair admissions practices and prohibit deceptive or misleading actions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential financial gains of admitting a student with questionable qualifications, without regard for the integrity of the admissions process, fails to uphold the college's commitment to academic excellence and fairness. This could lead to a decline in the perceived value of an Agnes Scott degree and damage its reputation among prospective students, alumni, and the broader academic community. Such an approach would likely violate internal college policies on admissions and potentially broader ethical guidelines for higher education. Another incorrect approach that involves circumventing established review processes to accommodate a specific applicant, even if well-intentioned, undermines the credibility of the admissions committee and the fairness of the selection process. This creates a precedent for favoritism and can lead to resentment among other applicants who followed the standard procedures. Ethically, this is problematic as it violates the principle of equal opportunity. A third incorrect approach that involves withholding information about the applicant's qualifications from the admissions committee to expedite the process is deceptive and unethical. This prevents the committee from making a fully informed decision, compromising the integrity of their role and potentially admitting a student who is not a good academic fit for Agnes Scott College. This action directly contravenes principles of honesty and due diligence expected in academic admissions. The professional reasoning framework for such situations involves a multi-step process. 1. Identify the core ethical and professional principles at play: fairness, transparency, integrity, accountability. 2. Consult relevant college policies and any applicable external guidelines. 3. Gather all necessary information objectively. 4. Consider the potential consequences of each possible action on all stakeholders. 5. Seek guidance from supervisors or relevant committees if the situation is complex or ambiguous. 6. Make a decision that is consistent with ethical principles and institutional policies, even if it means foregoing immediate perceived benefits. 7. Document the decision-making process and the rationale. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates that the Agnes Scott College Admissions Committee is seeking to proactively assess potential risks associated with applicants to ensure a safe and supportive campus environment. They are considering various methods to gather information beyond standard application materials. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical considerations for a college admissions process? Option A. Relying on anecdotal information or rumors shared among admissions staff regarding specific applicants' past behaviors. Option B. Formally requesting relevant background information through the designated admissions office, which is trained in handling sensitive applicant data and adhering to privacy policies. Option C. Directly contacting former teachers or mentors of applicants to inquire about any perceived behavioral risks without prior applicant consent. Option D. Conducting informal online searches of applicants' social media profiles and personal blogs to identify any potentially concerning content. The correct answer is B. Formally requesting relevant background information through the designated admissions office, which is trained in handling sensitive applicant data and adhering to privacy policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The admissions committee is seeking to understand potential risks associated with applicants, but the method of inquiry must adhere to privacy principles and the specific guidelines governing educational institutions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the risk assessment process is both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a structured and authorized inquiry process that respects applicant privacy. This means that the admissions committee should formally request information through established channels, such as the admissions office, which is equipped to handle such requests in a manner that complies with relevant privacy laws and college policies. This approach ensures that any information gathered is done so with appropriate consent or legal basis, and that the data is handled securely and used solely for the stated purpose of admissions review. This aligns with ethical principles of fairness and non-discrimination, and regulatory frameworks that protect personal information. An incorrect approach would be to bypass official channels and directly contact individuals or organizations that may hold sensitive information about applicants without proper authorization. This could involve reaching out to former teachers or employers directly, or attempting to access public records that are not intended for admissions review. Such actions would likely violate privacy laws, such as FERPA in the U.S. context, and could lead to legal repercussions for the college and the individuals involved. It also undermines the integrity of the admissions process by relying on potentially biased or unverified information. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on informal or speculative information, such as social media searches or rumors, to assess risk. While these sources might offer some insights, they are not a reliable or ethical basis for making admissions decisions. This method lacks due process and can lead to unfair judgments based on incomplete or inaccurate information, potentially violating principles of equal opportunity and non-discrimination. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the college's policies and applicable regulations regarding data privacy and admissions. When faced with a need for information, professionals should first consult internal guidelines and legal counsel to determine the appropriate and lawful methods of inquiry. This involves identifying authorized personnel or departments responsible for handling sensitive data and following established procedures for requesting and reviewing information. Prioritizing ethical conduct and regulatory compliance ensures that the decision-making process is fair, transparent, and legally sound. Question 12. Examination of the data shows that the Agnes College Admissions Committee is facing pressure to meet its enrollment targets for the upcoming academic year. During the review of applications, a committee member suggests prioritizing candidates who have demonstrated strong leadership potential, even if their academic scores are slightly below the stated average, to ensure a diverse and engaged incoming class. Another member proposes overlooking minor discrepancies in application completeness for candidates from underrepresented backgrounds to encourage their matriculation. A third member advocates for a holistic review that considers all aspects of an applicant's profile against the college's mission and values, ensuring that each applicant is evaluated fairly based on the established criteria. Which approach best upholds the principles of fair and ethical admissions at Agnes College? Option A. Prioritizing candidates with strong leadership potential over slightly lower academic scores to ensure a diverse and engaged incoming class. Option B. Overlooking minor discrepancies in application completeness for candidates from underrepresented backgrounds to encourage their matriculation. Option C. A holistic review that considers all aspects of an applicant's profile against the college's mission and values, ensuring that each applicant is evaluated fairly based on the established criteria. Option D. Focusing primarily on meeting enrollment targets by admitting candidates who are most likely to matriculate, regardless of other factors. The correct answer is A. Prioritizing candidates with strong leadership potential over slightly lower academic scores to ensure a diverse and engaged incoming class. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge because Agnes College, as an educational institution, must adhere to specific admissions policies and ethical guidelines when evaluating applicants. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can create a temptation to deviate from established criteria, but doing so would compromise the integrity of the admissions process and potentially violate institutional policies or even broader educational standards regarding fairness and equal opportunity. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional needs with the commitment to a fair and equitable admissions process. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of all applicant materials against the established admissions criteria. This ensures that decisions are based on merit and suitability for the college, rather than external pressures or subjective biases. This aligns with the ethical obligation of educational institutions to maintain transparency, fairness, and consistency in their admissions processes, upholding the trust placed in them by applicants, their families, and the wider community. Adherence to stated policies is paramount. An incorrect approach that prioritizes meeting enrollment numbers over established criteria would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the established admissions framework, potentially leading to the admission of less qualified candidates and the rejection of more deserving ones. Such an action undermines the principle of meritocracy and could lead to accusations of bias or unfairness, damaging the college's reputation. Another incorrect approach that involves selectively overlooking certain application components to favor specific candidates, even if they are otherwise strong, is also professionally unsound. This introduces subjectivity and potential bias into the process, violating the principle of consistent application of standards. It suggests that some applicants are held to different expectations, which is ethically problematic and erodes the credibility of the admissions committee. A further incorrect approach that involves creating new, unannounced criteria during the review process to accommodate specific applicants is a significant ethical and procedural failure. This demonstrates a lack of transparency and fairness, as applicants are not evaluated based on a known and consistent set of standards. It suggests a manipulation of the process to achieve a desired outcome, which is contrary to professional conduct in admissions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding and strict adherence to the college's published admissions policies and guidelines. When faced with pressure or difficult decisions, professionals should consult these policies, seek guidance from supervisors or the admissions committee, and prioritize objective evaluation based on the established criteria. Transparency, fairness, and consistency should be the guiding principles, ensuring that all applicants are treated equitably and that the integrity of the admissions process is maintained. Question 13. Assessment of an applicant's preparation strategy for the Agnes College entrance exam, considering ethical guidelines and academic integrity, would most appropriately involve which of the following? Option A. Utilizing official study guides and practice materials released by Agnes College, alongside general academic resources to strengthen foundational knowledge. Option B. Accessing and studying questions and answers from previous versions of the Agnes College entrance exam that have been shared informally online. Option C. Concentrating efforts on memorizing specific answers from publicly available past exam papers without a focus on understanding the underlying academic concepts. Option D. Engaging a third-party service to provide personalized tutoring that focuses on predicting specific exam questions and answers. Correct answer is A. Utilizing official study guides and practice materials released by Agnes College, alongside general academic resources to strengthen foundational knowledge. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the ethical considerations and academic integrity expected of students at Agnes College, specifically in the context of their entrance examination. The challenge lies in discerning between acceptable and unacceptable methods of preparation that could inadvertently lead to academic dishonesty or an unfair advantage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that preparation methods are both effective and ethically sound, aligning with the college's values. The correct approach involves utilizing resources that are publicly available and designed for general preparation, such as official study guides, practice tests provided by the college, and general academic resources that enhance foundational knowledge. This approach is ethically justified because it respects the integrity of the examination process. It ensures that all applicants are assessed on their own merits and preparedness, without relying on unfair advantages or compromising academic honesty. This aligns with the core principles of fairness and equal opportunity that are fundamental to college admissions. An incorrect approach that involves seeking out or using leaked examination materials is ethically unacceptable because it constitutes academic dishonesty and a violation of the college's honor code. This directly undermines the fairness of the admissions process and provides an unearned advantage, which is contrary to the principles of meritocracy and integrity. Another incorrect approach, such as paying an external party to complete parts of the application or preparation materials, is also ethically unacceptable. This misrepresents the applicant's own abilities and efforts, violating the principle of authenticity. It is a form of deception that compromises the integrity of the admissions process and the applicant's future academic standing. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on memorizing specific answers from past exams without understanding the underlying concepts is problematic. While not outright cheating, it demonstrates a lack of genuine learning and preparation. This approach fails to develop the critical thinking and problem-solving skills that Agnes Scott College aims to foster, and it does not represent true academic readiness. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a clear understanding of the institution's ethical guidelines and academic integrity policies. Applicants should prioritize preparation methods that are transparent, fair, and focused on genuine learning and skill development. When in doubt about the appropriateness of a preparation method, it is always best to err on the side of caution and consult official college resources or admissions guidelines. The ultimate goal is to demonstrate one's own capabilities and commitment to academic honesty. Question 14. Which approach would be most appropriate for an academic advisor to recommend to a student preparing for the Agnes Scott College entrance exam, given the college's specific curriculum and assessment guidelines? Option A. Seek out specialized tutoring services that promise enhanced admission prospects through alternative assessment methods. Option B. Prioritize preparation for a widely recognized national standardized test, assuming it covers similar academic areas. Option C. Emphasize the development of extensive extracurricular portfolios as a means to offset potential weaknesses in exam performance. Option D. Focus on mastering the content and format of the Agnes Scott College entrance exam as officially outlined by the college. The correct answer is D. Focus on mastering the content and format of the Agnes Scott College entrance exam as officially outlined by the college. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for students applying to college, balancing personal aspirations with the realities of academic requirements and institutional policies. The professional challenge lies in providing accurate and helpful guidance without overstepping boundaries or making promises that cannot be kept. Careful judgment is required to ensure that advice is both supportive and grounded in the established procedures of Agnes Scott College. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of Agnes Scott College's specific entrance exam requirements and a commitment to guiding the student within those parameters. This means advising the student to focus on mastering the content and format of the Agnes Scott College entrance exam, as it is officially defined by the institution. This approach is ethically sound and professionally responsible because it prioritizes accurate information and empowers the student to prepare effectively for the actual assessment they will face. It aligns with the principle of honesty and transparency in educational guidance. An incorrect approach would be to suggest focusing on a generalized standardized test that is not the Agnes Scott College entrance exam. This is professionally unacceptable because it misdirects the student's preparation, potentially leading to wasted effort and a lack of readiness for the specific exam. It violates the ethical obligation to provide accurate and relevant guidance. Another incorrect approach would be to recommend seeking external tutoring that claims to guarantee admission based on a modified curriculum. This is ethically problematic as it implies a shortcut or undue influence, which is contrary to the principles of fair and merit-based admissions. It also fails to adhere to the specified regulatory framework of the Agnes Scott College entrance exam. A third incorrect approach would be to advise the student to focus on extracurricular activities as a primary substitute for strong performance on the entrance exam. While extracurriculars are important for a holistic application, they cannot replace the core requirement of demonstrating academic readiness through the designated entrance exam. This approach is flawed because it misrepresents the weight and importance of the entrance exam within the Agnes Scott College admissions process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first identifying the specific requirements of the institution in question, then providing guidance that directly addresses those requirements, emphasizing accuracy and adherence to established procedures. If there is ambiguity, seeking clarification from the institution is paramount. The goal is always to equip the student with the knowledge and strategies to succeed within the defined framework. Question 15. Implementation of a new policy regarding academic probation for first-year students at Agnes Scott College has led to a situation where a student, Sarah, who has consistently demonstrated strong engagement in class discussions and extracurricular activities, is facing probation due to a single, significantly lower than usual grade on a major project in one course. Sarah has approached her academic advisor, expressing that the project's subject matter triggered a personal family crisis that significantly impacted her ability to focus and complete the work to her usual standard. The advisor is aware of Sarah's otherwise strong academic record and positive contributions to the college community. What is the most appropriate course of action for the academic advisor to take? Option A. Advise Sarah that the new policy is strict and that her single low grade will result in probation, suggesting she focus solely on improving her grades in the future without further discussion of her personal situation. Option B. Initiate a formal review of Sarah's academic standing, considering her overall performance and the extenuating circumstances she has presented, and explore potential academic accommodations or support services available through the college. Option C. Recommend that Sarah take a leave of absence from the college for the semester to address her personal crisis, without exploring any academic support options for her current situation. Option D. Immediately place Sarah on academic probation as per the new policy, informing her that her grade on the project does not meet the required standard. Correct answer is B. Initiate a formal review of Sarah's academic standing, considering her overall performance and the extenuating circumstances she has presented, and explore potential academic accommodations or support services available through the college. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the college's commitment to academic integrity with the need to support a student facing personal difficulties. The pressure to maintain academic standards must be weighed against the ethical obligation to provide a supportive environment and explore all reasonable accommodations. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness to the student and the integrity of the academic process. The correct approach involves a thorough, individualized assessment of the student's situation and academic performance, followed by a collaborative discussion about potential accommodations. This aligns with principles of fairness and due process, ensuring that the student's circumstances are considered without compromising academic rigor. Agnes Scott College's commitment to student success and holistic development would necessitate exploring all avenues to support the student while upholding academic standards. This approach respects the student's privacy and dignity, focusing on solutions rather than immediate punitive measures. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the student based on a single instance of academic struggle, without investigating the underlying causes. This fails to acknowledge the potential for extenuating circumstances and violates the principle of providing a supportive educational environment. Another incorrect approach would be to offer a blanket accommodation that significantly lowers academic expectations for all students facing similar issues, as this could undermine the value of the degree and create an unfair advantage. Finally, ignoring the student's plea for help and proceeding with disciplinary action without any attempt at communication or understanding would be ethically unsound and contrary to the mission of a student-centered institution. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the situation, exploring all relevant policies and ethical guidelines, consulting with appropriate colleagues or supervisors, and making a decision that is fair, consistent, and in the best interest of both the student and the institution. This involves active listening, empathy, and a commitment to finding constructive solutions. Question 16. The efficiency study reveals a potential imbalance in resource allocation between academic tutoring and mental health counseling services at Agnes Scott College, with a significant increase in demand for mental health support not being matched by a proportional increase in funding. Considering the college's mission to foster holistic student development, which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Maintain current funding levels for both departments, citing budgetary constraints and the need for stability, despite the documented increase in demand for mental health services. Option B. Reallocate funds from academic tutoring to mental health counseling to immediately address the perceived crisis, without a thorough evaluation of the impact on tutoring services. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive needs assessment involving student surveys, departmental data, and expert consultations to inform a revised, data-driven resource allocation plan that prioritizes student well-being and academic success. Option D. Allocate additional funding to mental health counseling based solely on the loudest student advocacy groups' requests, without further investigation into overall student needs. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive needs assessment involving student surveys, departmental data, and expert consultations to inform a revised, data-driven resource allocation plan that prioritizes student well-being and academic success. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential discrepancy in how Agnes Scott College allocates resources for student support services, specifically in the distribution of funding between academic tutoring and mental health counseling. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the college's fiduciary responsibilities with its ethical obligations to provide comprehensive student well-being support. Decisions must be made with a deep understanding of the college's mission, student needs, and the regulatory environment governing higher education institutions. The Agnes Scott College entrance exam context implies a focus on understanding the principles of good governance and ethical decision-making within an academic institution, rather than specific external regulations that might not apply directly to internal operational decisions. The correct approach involves a holistic review of student needs, informed by data from various departments, and a transparent decision-making process that prioritizes student welfare and academic success. This aligns with the ethical imperative for educational institutions to foster a supportive environment for all students. It also reflects sound administrative practice by ensuring resources are directed where they will have the greatest positive impact, aligning with the college's mission to empower students. An approach that solely prioritizes the department with the most vocal advocacy, without a comprehensive needs assessment, fails to uphold the principle of equitable resource distribution and could neglect critical student support areas. This is an ethical failure, as it may lead to underserved student populations. An approach that rigidly adheres to historical funding allocations, ignoring current data on student demand and emerging needs, demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and foresight. This can be seen as a failure in administrative responsibility and an ethical lapse if it results in diminished support for students facing significant challenges. An approach that focuses exclusively on cost-saving measures without considering the impact on the quality and accessibility of student support services is ethically problematic. While fiscal responsibility is important, it should not come at the expense of student well-being, which is a core mission of the college. The professional reasoning process for similar situations involves 1. Data gathering. Collect comprehensive data on student needs, service utilization, and resource availability across all relevant departments. 2. Stakeholder consultation. Engage with students, faculty, staff, and administrators to understand perspectives and priorities. 3. Mission alignment. Evaluate potential decisions against the college's stated mission and values. 4. Impact assessment. Analyze the potential positive and negative consequences of different resource allocation strategies on student success and well-being. 5. Transparent communication. Clearly articulate the rationale behind decisions to all stakeholders. Question 17. During the evaluation of applications for the upcoming academic year at Agnes Scott College, an admissions officer is reviewing a candidate whose academic record is strong but whose essay, while well-written, expresses views that might be considered controversial by some members of the college community. The officer is also aware that the college has a stated goal of increasing diversity in its incoming class. Considering the college's commitment to academic excellence and its diversity initiatives, which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical admissions practices? Option A. Prioritize admitting the candidate due to the potential for their controversial views to add a unique perspective to campus discussions, thereby contributing to diversity, even if other aspects of their application are not as strong as some other candidates. Option B. Thoroughly evaluate the essay based on its writing quality, critical thinking, and originality, while also considering the candidate's overall academic profile and other application components against Agnes Scott College's published admissions criteria, ensuring that diversity goals are met through a fair and consistent application of these standards to all candidates. Option C. Seek informal feedback from faculty members outside the admissions committee about the candidate's essay content and potential impact on campus, using this feedback to heavily influence the final admissions decision. Option D. focus primarily on the candidate's academic scores and standardized test results, downplaying the essay's content and the college's diversity goals to ensure a purely merit-based selection process. The correct answer is B. Thoroughly evaluate the essay based on its writing quality, critical thinking, and originality, while also considering the candidate's overall academic profile and other application components against Agnes Scott College's published admissions criteria, ensuring that diversity goals are met through a fair and consistent application of these standards to all candidates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the college's commitment to academic integrity with the need to fairly assess applicants. The pressure to admit a diverse class can sometimes create tension with the strict adherence to established admissions criteria. Admissions officers must navigate these competing priorities with integrity and a commitment to established policies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of all application components, including academic records, essays, and recommendations, against Agnes Scott College's stated admissions criteria. This ensures that all applicants are evaluated on the same, transparent standards, upholding the principle of fairness and equal opportunity. Adherence to the college's published admissions policies and guidelines is paramount, as these represent the established framework for evaluating candidates. This approach aligns with ethical principles of impartiality and consistency in decision-making. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes meeting diversity quotas over objective academic merit and adherence to stated admissions criteria is ethically flawed. This could lead to the admission of less qualified candidates, undermining the academic standards of the college, and potentially creating a perception of unfairness among applicants. It deviates from the principle of merit-based evaluation and could violate internal college policies regarding admissions processes. An approach that relies heavily on anecdotal information or personal biases, rather than documented evidence within the application, is also problematic. Admissions decisions should be based on verifiable information and established criteria, not on subjective impressions or external influences. This can lead to inconsistent and potentially discriminatory outcomes, failing to uphold the college's commitment to a fair and equitable admissions process. An approach that bypasses established review procedures or seeks to unduly influence the decisions of the admissions committee based on personal connections or external pressure is a serious ethical breach. This undermines the integrity of the admissions process and can create an uneven playing field for other applicants. It violates principles of transparency and fairness and could lead to a loss of trust in the admissions system. Professional reasoning. Professionals in college admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, fairness, and adherence to established policies and ethical guidelines. This involves 1. Clearly understanding and applying the college's stated admissions criteria. 2. Evaluating all applicants based on the same objective standards. 3. Documenting the rationale for all admissions decisions. 4. Being aware of and mitigating personal biases. 5. Upholding the integrity of the admissions process by resisting undue influence or pressure. 6. Prioritizing academic merit and suitability for the college's programs, while also considering holistic review factors as defined by the institution. Question 18. System analysis indicates that a fellow student, struggling with a challenging assignment for an Agnes Scott College course, approaches you asking for direct answers to specific questions and for you to share your completed work. You have already finished your assignment and are confident in your understanding of the material. How should you respond to uphold the academic integrity expected at Agnes Scott College? Option A. Share your answers and completed work to help your fellow student, believing that collaboration is always beneficial. Option B. Ignore the request and avoid any interaction with the student to prevent potential complications. Option C. Politely decline to share your answers or completed work, explaining that the assignment is intended to be an individual effort and encouraging them to seek help from the professor or academic resources. Option D. Offer to help the student by explaining concepts and guiding them through the problem-solving process, but without providing direct answers or your completed work. The correct answer is C. Politely decline to share your answers or completed work, explaining that the assignment is intended to be an individual effort and encouraging them to seek help from the professor or academic resources. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge in understanding and applying the core values and academic integrity principles expected of Agnes Scott College students. The difficulty lies in discerning between acceptable collaboration and academic dishonesty, particularly when faced with a peer who may be misinterpreting or intentionally circumventing these standards. A student must not only understand the rules, but also be able to act ethically and responsibly when confronted with a situation that tests those boundaries. The correct approach involves upholding academic integrity by refusing to share answers or completed work that is meant to be an individual effort. This aligns with Agnes Scott College's commitment to fostering an environment of honest scholarship and intellectual growth. Sharing answers directly undermines the learning process, devalues the individual effort of other students, and violates the trust placed in students by the institution. Ethically, it is dishonest and unfair to oneself and others. An incorrect approach would be to share the answers or completed work. This directly violates the principles of academic integrity and honesty. It not only compromises the student's own learning, but also contributes to an environment where academic dishonesty is normalized. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the request and not respond, as this fails to address the ethical dilemma and could be interpreted as tacit approval or a lack of commitment to academic integrity. A third incorrect approach would be to report the peer without first attempting to educate them on the college's policies, which might be an overreaction and could damage peer relationships unnecessarily, though the primary failure is still the potential for enabling dishonesty. Professionals in academic settings, like students at Agnes Scott, should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes ethical conduct and adherence to institutional guidelines. This involves clearly understanding the rules, assessing the situation for potential violations, and acting in a manner that upholds integrity. When faced with a peer's request that seems questionable, the first step should be to clarify expectations and gently remind the peer of the college's academic integrity policies. If the peer persists or the situation remains unclear, seeking guidance from a professor or academic advisor is a prudent step. The ultimate goal is to foster an environment of mutual respect and honest academic pursuit. Question 19. Performance analysis shows a pattern of students in a particular introductory course seeking external assistance for assignments, with some instances raising concerns about potential academic dishonesty. The professor suspects that a few students may have submitted work that is not entirely their own, but they lack definitive proof. The college's academic integrity policy emphasizes both upholding scholarly standards and supporting student learning. Which of the following actions best aligns with Agnes Scott College's commitment to academic integrity and student development in this situation? Option A. Ignore the suspected instances of academic dishonesty to avoid creating a negative atmosphere in the classroom and focus solely on teaching the course material. Option B. Publicly announce a zero-tolerance policy for academic dishonesty in the course and implement stricter, more intrusive monitoring of all future assignments. Option C. Conduct a confidential meeting with each student suspected of academic dishonesty to discuss their understanding of academic integrity, review their assignment process, and offer resources for academic support, while clearly outlining the consequences of confirmed violations. Option D. Immediately report all suspected cases to the Dean of Students for disciplinary action, without further direct engagement with the students. The correct answer is C. Conduct a confidential meeting with each student suspected of academic dishonesty to discuss their understanding of academic integrity, review their assignment process, and offer resources for academic support, while clearly outlining the consequences of confirmed violations. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing academic integrity with the college's commitment to fostering a supportive learning environment. The core tension lies in how to address potential academic misconduct without unduly discouraging students from seeking help or admitting to difficulties. A nuanced approach is required that prioritizes fairness, due process, and educational remediation over punitive measures, aligning with Agnes Scott College's values. The correct approach involves a thorough, confidential investigation that respects the student's privacy and provides an opportunity for them to explain their actions. This aligns with principles of academic fairness and due process, ensuring that any disciplinary action is based on a complete understanding of the situation. It also allows for educational intervention, which is often more beneficial to a student's long-term academic development than immediate sanctions. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes learning and growth while upholding academic standards. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the student or impose severe penalties without a proper investigation. This fails to uphold the principle of due process, which requires a fair hearing and consideration of all evidence. It also risks alienating students and creating a climate of fear, which is counterproductive to Agnes Scott's educational mission. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential misconduct altogether. This undermines academic integrity and sets a precedent that such behavior is acceptable, which is ethically irresponsible and damaging to the college's reputation. Professionals should approach such situations by first gathering all available information objectively. They should then consult relevant college policies on academic integrity and student conduct. The next step is to engage with the student in a private, supportive manner, allowing them to present their perspective. Based on this dialogue and the gathered evidence, a decision should be made that balances the need for academic accountability with the college's commitment to student development and fairness. This often involves a tiered system of responses, starting with education and warnings, and escalating to more serious sanctions only when necessary. Question 20. The audit findings indicate a pattern of procedural irregularities in the admissions process that could potentially impact the fairness and integrity of student selections. The audit report is comprehensive and details specific instances and systemic issues. As a member of the college's administrative team, what is the most appropriate next step to address these findings? Option A. Immediately present the full audit report to the Board of Trustees and legal counsel for review and guidance on disclosure and remediation. Option B. Discreetly inform the admissions department of the findings and instruct them to make internal adjustments without further external reporting. Option C. Release a summary of the audit findings to the student body and faculty, highlighting the positive aspects of the admissions process while downplaying the identified irregularities. Option D. Publicly announce that an audit has been conducted and that some procedural issues are being investigated to assure transparency. Correct answer is A. Immediately present the full audit report to the Board of Trustees and legal counsel for review and guidance on disclosure and remediation. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge because it requires balancing the need for transparency and accountability with the potential for reputational damage and the privacy of individuals involved. The audit findings, if not handled appropriately, could lead to significant negative consequences for Agnes Scott College. The core professional challenge lies in determining the most ethical and legally compliant method for disclosing these findings to relevant stakeholders. The correct approach involves a measured and responsible disclosure process. This means first ensuring the accuracy and completeness of the audit report, then consulting with legal counsel to understand all relevant privacy laws and reporting obligations. The subsequent communication should be directed to the appropriate internal governance bodies, e.g., the Board of Trustees, and, if necessary, external regulatory bodies, following established protocols. This approach prioritizes adherence to legal and ethical standards, ensuring that information is shared in a controlled and appropriate manner, thereby mitigating undue harm while fulfilling any mandatory reporting requirements. This aligns with principles of good governance and ethical conduct expected of educational institutions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately and publicly release the full audit findings without proper review or consultation. This would likely violate privacy laws and could expose the college to unnecessary legal challenges and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore or suppress the audit findings. This is ethically reprehensible and could lead to severe regulatory penalties and a loss of trust from students, faculty, and the wider community. Finally, selectively disclosing parts of the audit to certain individuals or groups while withholding others without a clear, justifiable reason would be a breach of transparency and fairness, potentially leading to accusations of bias or cover-up. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding the full scope and implications of the findings. 2. Identifying all applicable legal and ethical frameworks. 3. Consulting with legal and compliance experts. 4. Developing a communication plan that is transparent, accurate, and compliant. 5. Executing the plan with integrity and accountability.